Uh, yes, thank you everyone for coming this beautiful rainy Sunday morning. Today, the we're talking about seasons, and fall is one of my favorite seasons. All right, let me get it over here. Okay, so one of the amazing things that I really enjoy about the season is all the amazing fall stuff that we get to do during this time. For example, yesterday we had a wonderful Halloween party here at the church. I really want to say a big thank you to Precious, to her parents, and for everyone else who organized it. Thank you. I know it's a lot of work, but the kids I think had a lot of fun, and I think it was a great success. So, um, what I would like to be talking about today is recognizing the season that we're in. I'd like to start off with a story that I remember. This is about Hazel, my daughter, about recognizing a new season that she came across. And this happened in winter. This was when she was 1 year old, and this is the first time that she had seen snow. So Hazel was a very active, rambunctious little girl, real little toddler. She loved going outside. She loved playing in the front yard, in the driveway. And one morning, when she looked out the window, it was covered with a blanket of snow. And as you can imagine, for a toddler, for the first time seeing snow, it's pretty incredible. It looks, you don't see the grass. You see just a big, fluffy, soft, like it looks like the world's covered in the blankets. And Hazel loved blankets. She loved jumping on the beds. And so before we could uh, stop her, she rushed out and she plopped up down in the snow. She dug her hands into the snow and feeling the nice softy goodness. And you could see in her eyes, the joy and the excitement and the wonder. And of course, then that slowly turned into confusion and to pain. I think at this age, you don't really register the cold. You put your hands in the snow, it starts becoming painful. So she started got complaining, crying, and then we were able to get her back in and get her dressed up more comfortably as appropriate for the season, as appropriate for the snow. And once she got bundled up, when she put on gloves, and then she was able to appreciate the snow and have a good time outside. All right, so of course, as it's very normal again for toddlers to experience this. This is the first time they've seen it. They've never had a winter before. As adults, we've had experience. We've had winters before, especially us in Ohio. We know what to do. We know how to prepare for the winter because we've been through it before. Seasons are not the only things, though, that repeats. We also see that in history. And I guess you could say another term for seasons is time periods. All right, so in the Bible, Ecclesiastes 3:1, the Bible verse says, "There's a time for every purpose under the sun." When we look at history, we see that is a very interesting phenomenon. We see events in history, apparently they seem like different eras seem to parallel each other. It seems like events in history, they seem to repeat themselves, kind of like seasons. They repeat every year. The reason why we would see these repetition, this repeats, these parallels in history is not for a physical reason. Of course, as we know from Cahoots, the reason why the seasons change is for physical reasons because the Earth is rotating around the sun. The reason why history repeats itself is for a different reason. It's because God has a goal. All right, let's read this quote from Divine Principle, chapter 3, section 1. Examining the course of human history, we often find cases where the various circumstances of a period in history are repeated in similar form during a later age. So ever since the human fall, Adam and Eve, God has had one goal. That one goal is to restore humankind back to him, to his children, us, humankind. His one goal throughout all of history has been to bring humankind back to him and to establish his will and kingdom of heaven on the earth. That's how it was meant to be. So this unfolds through clear historical seasons or time periods from Adam to Jesus, to Abraham, to Jesus, to today. The reason why I wanted to talk about seasons and time periods today is because the time that we're living in, it just didn't make sense to me. It's kind of like a toddler, right? So this is the first time I'm experiencing this kind of season. It just didn't make sense. I didn't understand. On February 22nd, 2013, Mother Moon, as hopefully we all know, and we also call her Holy Mother Han, she declared that it was Foundation Day of Chonilguk. And again, as we saw from the cahoots, Chonilguk, it stands for, in English, Nation of Cosmic Peace and Unity. Or, in other words, it's the establishment of the kingdom of heaven on earth. And of course, we don't say that, I don't think any of us believes that everything's done now. Everything has been set up and resolved. But it was a foundation day of Chonilguk, the kingdom of heaven on earth. And this is something that is huge. I mean, this is the Lord's Prayer. This is something that Jesus and billions of Christians have been praying for 2,000 years. Again, the Lord's Prayer is, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So that's a huge declaration. The true mother and true parents have declared that now this is the era of Chonilguk. But however, recent events, it didn't really make sense to me. If we are living in the establishment of the kingdom of heaven on earth, if this is Chonilguk, why is there so much persecution right now in Korea, right? Why was your mother, arrested and other leaders and they're sent to detainment? Why is there so much persecution in Japan? Like, why are the courts, they said they found bad stuff, or I don't know all the details, but they ordered the dissolution of the Unification Church in Japan. And so yeah, again, that doesn't make sense. If we're living in the era of kingdom of heaven, why was this happening? And I'm not sure if anyone else here was wondering the same thing. So I took my mom's advice. I was confused about what was going on. So I started doing a Hoon-Dok-hae condition, reading the Divine Principle. And during this condition, I feel I got some really interesting inspiration. I feel like God gave me some answers to what I was asking. He was giving me answers to the questions I was looking for. And so with your permission, I'd like to share some of that inspiration. Is that all right? Yeah. All right. And of course, to be honest, even if you had said no, I was going to share it anyway, because Eugene gave me permission. All right. So to understand the time period that we're in, to understand the season that we're in, we go back to history to see where we are at, just like with actual seasons. All right, going back to Divine Principle, chapter 3, section 1. Thus, the entire history of the province of restoration, again, province of restoration, bringing God's children back to him, may be divided according to the form of parallels. The principal cause behind these parallels lies in God's providence of restoration. God cannot just snap his fingers and forcibly have established the kingdom of heaven. This has to give us free will. It has to work through key central figures throughout history, and it is through human responsibility, of course, with God, that we have to return to him. God cannot just do this by himself. So we'll see this in I guess you could call it a strategy or seasons again, in parallels in history. This is a Divine Principle. I'm going to go through this really fast. This is its own lecture series. If you haven't heard this before, I definitely encourage reading Divine Principle or talk to someone who knows more about it. And it's a really interesting subject. But all right, I'm going to go really fast. So we started at the beginning, Adam, fall of humankind. All right, so now this starts this God's strategy of restoring humankind. 1,600 years, suffering, misery, not very bad. You know what? It's so bad that at Noah's time, God says, this is horrible. I have to destroy everything with a flood. All right, then Noah builds an ark. There's a flood. 400 years, humanity kind of reestablished itself into like regional tribes and stuff like that. Then God calls out one specific person to be the father of his people, whom he will send his son, Jesus, eventually. And that starts the age of the patriarchs: Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. So this is a 120-year period. Jacob buys the birthright from Esau with a bowl of lentils. 40 years pass. He gets the blessing from his father instead of Esau. Esau wants to kill him, and he flees to Haran and to his uncle Laban, where he works for his uncle Laban for 21 years. 7 years for Rachel, 7 years for Leah, 7 years for prophet. And then he returns back after that victorious to his home. And then 40 years later, this is when Joseph was sent to Egypt, sold into slavery by his brothers, and he rises up with God, help of God, to become second in command of Jesus. And there's a famine, and then he invites his family, Jacob and everyone else, to go to Egypt. You can see that's the first timeline. Now we're going to go to the second one. This is the age of the Israelites. So Abraham to Moses, 400 years, slavery in Egypt. Then we start to then Moses. God calls one specific person, Moses, to bring them out of Egypt to the land of Canaan. And now we start the period of Judges. So this is the point of regional leadership. Israel is divided to 12 tribes. The leaders are the tribes, patriarchs of the tribes. God sent judges to give his word, to try to realign them with his commandments. It was there was some pluses, there was some good times and some bad times. Well, it was a rough period. It was really rough, actually, because the Israelites would worship idols. They would get attacked by other countries. God would deliver them, and it was a big cycle. And eventually, people in Israel, they said, we're tired of getting invaded. We want to be strong, a strong country. So to be strong, we need a king. And so the prophet, the judge at that time, his name was Samuel. And so they went to Samuel and says, give us a king. And Samuel says, are you sure? If you get a king, your sons are going to be forced to fight in his armies. And the people of Israel said, it's okay, we want a king. And they said, and Samuel said, well, if you get a king, you're going to have to pay taxes. And then the Israelites said, taxes? And he said, no, we still want a king. And so that's when Samuel and God knew that the Israelites were very serious. They were willing to pay taxes. And so that they got, and so they anointed Saul to be king. David, also Solomon. So this is the period, again, of patriarchs. Now this is the period of the kingdom. The 12 tribes of Israel were united kingdom time. God gives them very clear directions, commandments to follow. They did some of it, not all of it, especially Solomon. He was a very wise person, but unfortunately, towards the end, he seemed to be using that wisdom for more selfish things. He got a lot of wives. I forget, was it 1,000 wives, 300 wives, something like that. Very high taxes, not very just. So that was not a good foundation for God. So then we see the period of the divided kingdom. Israel split into north and south. And over here, this is the period of divided kingdoms, north and south. Again, God sent judges. I'm going to be talking about coming back to this period later on. Israelites did not follow God's commandments, and now they were exiled to foreign countries. Syria conquered the northern, took the Israelites as slaves. Babylon conquered Judah, the southern kingdom, and exiled to Babylon. And then they returned. They were in exile for 70 years. They returned after 140 years, reestablished. Malachi, 400 years preparation for Jesus. All right, let's go into the Christian empire. All right, so Jesus, he was born, and he was crucified and resurrected. And now after 400 years, look at that, 400 years of persecution. It was actually maybe more exactly around 330 years, because that's when Constantine made Christianity the national religion of Rome. But so again, approximately, some of these are not going to be exact. These are symbolic time periods. Like fall is really short. Anyway. All right, so just 400 years. St. Augustine. Augustine, very important person in history. Historians consider him as the bridge between ancient civilization and medieval civilization. His writings form the backbone of Western Christianity. Very important person. And this started the regional church leadership. This created the regional churches. This time period was the feudal system, where there was lords and there was regional castles, etc. And exactly 800 AD, Charlemagne, he was crowned the emperor of the Christian kingdom, Christian empire. Unlike the Israelites, they didn't ask for Charlemagne. Charlemagne became the emperor by conquering people, and some marriage, some negotiation, but a lot of conquest. So symbolically, we have the 120 for the Christian empire, 400 years for divided. I looked it up to dates. It's actually split down the middle. 254 years, 250 years, but together they're about the same. The Pope was exiled and returned, and now Martin Luther came at 1517 to started the Protestant movement, and then we preparation for 400 years for the Second Coming. Okay, I went through that pretty fast. So now let's see how does this. So now this is again the summary of the history. How does this apply for today? All right, so I'm going to scroll up here. This next part, this is not part of, I haven't heard this from any Christian leaders, from our church leaders, but this is something that I first heard from our brother Craig Smith. His observation was that Father Moon seems to be working through a timeline, an accelerated time period in our own church, in our own movement. It made sense to me because True Father, his goal, our goal, is the same as God's goal, which is to create the kingdom of heaven, return people back to God. It also makes sense to me that True Father wouldn't just make up his own thing. He says, all right, he wrote the divine principle, he wrote the timelines, so it would make sense to me that he says, I'm going to do the exact same thing that God has been doing. All right, so let's look at some key dates. True Father, born 1920, 40 years, persecution, a lot of persecution. Torture, imprisonment, not very good. 1960, 40 years after that, the Holy Blessing. And this is the True Father sent out the first missionaries to Japan and to the United States, 1959. And also this period, in 1975, that's when he sent 120 missionaries across the world. And I think a lot of us here, a lot of parents here, you are very familiar with this time period. This was a time of a lot of church growth, establishment of regional churches. And so that was that time period. Then what happened in the year 2000? That is exactly. So it's very interesting. January 3, 2001, Father Moon declared the coronation of God's kingship. They were now entering the era of Cheonilguk. So November 2001. This is a long quote. I'm going to go through it pretty fast. I apologize. Those who are determined to be such sons and daughters of God, raise your hands. You do not belong to your spouses. Your sons and daughters do not belong to you. Your ancestors do not belong to you. All things do not belong to you. They should all be offered to God. We have started a task with a tight schedule to realize God's kingdom on the worldwide level by the deadline of 2012. We have no time to waste, no wars like this war. Therefore, you should be determined as though you're really going to the front line in the war to fulfill your responsibility, to become the people of filial piety and patriotism. You should fulfill the role of saint as the one called by God on a mission, on his behalf, on behalf of Adam and Eve. Make certain that you bring God's supreme power back to him. Do you understand? Those who can do this, raise both your hands and applaud. So again, I thought this was very interesting. This is something that he said. Looks like it's very intentional. He says now in 2001, it says we're now entering a 12-year time period. Let's see what else he did during this time period. 2003, Father Moon crowned himself and Mother Moon as King and Queen of Peace. 2007, coronation of the kingship of God and True Parents. 2009, True Parents publicly crowned their youngest son, Hyungjin Moon, as the international president and heir. I remember, middle schoolers, high schoolers, you guys didn't live through this period, but I do remember this period, and I was kind of a little confused. We're Americans. We fought a Revolutionary War, so we don't have kings. And actually, I think by coincidence, this weekend there's a lot of protests around the country called a No Kings protest. So I was kind of It did bother me. I was just kind of wondering, why is so much emphasis on kingship during this time period? Well, I guess, this is the period of the United Kingdom of Kings. Also, I thought it was also interesting, too. In the same time period, 2009, Injin Moon and Love and Life Ministries, we started having national services. I thought that was very interesting. And that is we were so used to having regional services, regional leadership, but then in 2009, it was kind of like a United Kingdom. We started having national services. We didn't have speakers here anymore. We were watching a live broadcast from New York. All right, so that was that period. Of course, what happened? What happened after that? All right, 2012, Father Moon, he went to the spirit world. Hyungjin Moon, he officially separated from the May movement and founded Sanctuary Church. Hyunjin Moon also officially separated in 2014 with the Global Peace Foundation. That's very interesting. So now you can see the church divided. A lot of our brothers and sisters, they went with, they joined or they separated and went with Sanctuary Church. That looks like we're in a time of division, according to the timeline. So, all right. So now that we've established what it seems like, what season we're living in. All right. So now, how does that apply for? What does that mean for us? Just like if it's fall, we put on jackets. I see a lot more sweaters in the audience today. It's winter, we put on coats, we put on gloves. If we're living in this period, if this is the season that we're living in right now, what do we do to prepare? Or what should our actions be during this time? All right, just like seasons, we look at history. What did they do? All right. During this period of the divided kingdom, it was actually very clear what God wanted the Israelites to do. This was in the Bible, if you're interested, is Kings 1 and Kings 2. The standards that they were looking at, the kings especially, is did they worship the God of Israel alone? That was one. The second thing that the Bible measured, or the Bible specifically says, did God find them to be righteous in his eyes? The second thing was, did they get rid of idolatry in Israel? The third thing is, did they remain faithful to the covenant and rule justly? So those were the three standards that the Bible says that the kings were judged by. There were 19 kings in the northern kingdom. It was called Israel, and 19 kings. And how many of those 19 kings did God find just in the Bible? I'm going to pick out someone. I'm going to pick out, let's see, Timothy. Timothy, how many out of those 19 kings, how many did God find righteous? Make a guess. 0. That is correct. God did not find a single righteous king. Now in his second kingdom, the southern kingdom of Judah, there were 20 kings during this time period. How many did God find to be just in his eyes during this time period? I'm going to pick another one. Kevin, make a guess. None? No, it's actually more. He did find a few. One more guess. Let's see. On Yoko. Make a guess. 3. Okay. It was actually higher. So God found 8 kings in the southern kingdom to be just, to be righteous during this time. 12 were not to be righteous. The picture in the middle, this is a picture of Elijah. He was sent to the northern kingdom. They were worshiping Baal. And so that was the famous story when they had a challenge to a contest, who would light the altar on fire. This one is King Hezekiah. He's from Judah. He was actually one of the righteous kings. Now we'll be talking more about him later. Okay, so it was very clear what God wanted the Israelites to do in that season. What about the Christian church? What did in that season, again, same season, what did God want them to do? A little bit less clear. The divine principle does go over this, but we can make a very strong deduction of what God wanted Christians to do, because he sent people to tell them, to warn them. In the Israelites, God sent, they call them prophets at this time period. In the Christian tradition, we would call them reformers or saints. So God sent saints to warn the Christians, to wake them up. And so I'm going to be using this right now. It was one of the saints. He was born in this time period. of 1850. Let's see. He was born 1181, right in this period of divided Christian kingdom. So this is Saint Francis of Assisi. He was born during the Crusades, and he saw there were a lot of problems in the Christian church. He saw that there was a lot of corruption. There was a lot of focus on money, wealth. There weren't the Christian leaders. They weren't ruling very justly at this time. I'm going to just give some historical examples. Being a bishop or a priest was seen as a status symbol. They were getting paid actually really well. They were becoming wealthy. They were landowners. And if you guys know your history, in medieval times, being a landowner meant you were really rich. Bishops would be assigned to areas. They would collect a very nice paycheck, but they would never visit their congregation, provide spiritual guidance or help or support. To give one example, this happened a little bit later, but popes are seen as the absolute authority in the Christian kingdom. And so you would imagine, if you're just going to select a pope, that the Christian leaders, the archbishops, the cardinals, the leaders, they would come together in prayer, say, God, who do you want to be the next pope? That's what you would hope for, that they would look for guidance on selecting the pope. It was not done that way. It was done for political connections. People they were giving money to be the pope. There was a story, they were selecting a pope in Rome, and there were protests in the streets. There were the leaders, they were in a room, and there were people in the floor below. They would shove swords through the floorboards and pikes, and because they were trying to intimidate, trying to force for their candidate to be the pope. Christianity at the time. It was not a good foundation. It was not a solid foundation for the second coming of Christ. So God sent saints, sent reformers to try to clean up some of the messes, the problems that were going on in the community. God had needed a good foundation. God needs a good foundation to send the second coming. All right, so so now we talked about the past. So now what about us? Do we have clear directions? Actually, it's very interesting. We were given actually very clear instructions. I believe this is also a speech in 2001. This is the Constitution of Chan Il-guk. So True Father, he said there were three. There were three immutable laws of the Constitution of the Kingdom of Heaven. Those were his words. To summarize these 3 points is do not stain the blood lineage, maintain sexual purity. That was number 1. Number 2, do not violate human rights. This was a little bit more murky. Some of the things I read on was something about if you talk about business, we don't fire or promote things just based on personal desire. I think there were other things too. And 3, very clear, do not steal or misuse public funds. All right, so now this is the season we're in. This is the commandments. These are the direction that we received. What happens if we don't fulfill them? Right? Let's just say, let's use snow as the example. What if we don't put on gloves when it's appropriate for the season? And what if we put our hands in the snow and our hands will freeze? It gets really painful. So what happens, again, for spiritually reasons, if we don't follow these guidance, these direction from God, from Spirit? Well, we know what happens from history, again, because history repeats itself. Seasons repeat themselves. This is a good example, actually. This is King Hezekiah, the king of Judah. He was a righteous king, as seen by God. When he became king, he reopened the Temple of Solomon. He ordered that all idols be destroyed throughout the kingdom, and he led Judah to worship God and only God again. During his rule, as we know, the northern kings, none of them are righteous. The northern king, the Assyria, they came and invaded. They laid siege to the capital of Israel, and the capital of Israel was Samaria, and they laid siege for 3 years. They conquered it, and if you guys know your history, when you're conquered, it was really bad. A lot of people killed, a lot of people sent in slavery, city looted, very bad situation. Miserable situation. And so the king, victorious from the northern kingdom, came to Judah and now laid siege to Jerusalem. Hezekiah, he was a righteous king, so he prayed and he relied on God for deliverance. And God sent in one night an angel of death, and he slew 185,000 of the Assyrian army. The rest, they went back home, and the king, who was mocking God outside the gate, says, "Your God is powerless. You're a fool to worship him. Our God is stronger." So he retreated back to defeat in Nineveh. And the king went back to worship at his temple, and there he was killed by his own sons. Okay, what happens in the Christian kingdom if, again, that they did not follow God's direction? They were also attacked by outside forces. This is the time of crusades. They were the Christian kingdoms. They were attacked by the Mongols. They were attacked by the Ottoman Empire. They were attacked by Islam, the Muslim countries. And the Crusades, again, if you guys know your history, then it had forced the Christian nations to band together to expel some of the invaders. All right, so now what happened? Now what about today, as we were talking about earlier? What happens if we don't follow God's direction? Well, as we could see now, our church is also being attacked by outside forces. As we see here in these articles, court orders the solution of Unification Church Japan. More recently, South Korean Dikes Unification Church Mother Moon. And so I don't see this. Again, this is one of the dangers, I guess. I don't think we should look at this as inevitable. I don't know. Perhaps this is not predestined. This is not just a punishment that we have to endure. It says, "Oh, we're in the era of division. We're just have to wait it out." I don't. That's not the way I see it. I think what God has been doing throughout history is these attacks from outside forces have been wake-up calls. These have been called to come back to Him. So, what is Mother Moon's what is one of her main messages to us right now? She's calling us to be like pure water. All right. So what is pure water? What does that mean? I summarize into 3 points. Recognize you've been being born into a blessed family, and therefore bear a unique identity. You have to be pure, untainted, not polluted, like pure water. Do not mix faith with worldly desires or resentments. Be humble and ready to flow where heaven guides. All right, so I have to be honest. When I first heard the message about to be like pure water, I thought it was a very nice message. I thought it was just like another feel-good message, I guess. We get a lot of these good messages from pastors, from two parents. I thought it was a message like, be kind to each other. I thought it was like a message like, do your hundake, exercise every day, drink water, drink pure water. Don't be good. However, in the context of seasons, in the context of parallels history, I now actually I see it differently. I have a more deeper appreciation of what Mother is trying to do. I think just like God sent prophets, He sent judges to the Israelites, just like God sent saints and reformers to the Christian church, I feel God is speaking through Mother, and this is her warning call to be pure. This is the time period. This is the season where we have to be pure, like pure water. So I think so this is a time where we have to think about our own lives. Like, what aspects in our own lives are not aligned with God's direction? What part's not pure? What things that don't hold up to scrutiny? I'm going to give a personal example. Maybe it's not spiritual, but I got a letter from the state of Ohio a few months ago saying I owed a few thousand in back taxes. Never happened to me before. First time in my life. I had to go to one of those tax accounting places to get things sorted out. Never went to a tax place before. I always filled out taxes on my own. Never had a problem. Maybe it's a coincidence. Or maybe again, maybe this is a time where where each one of us as leaders of our own tribals, messiahs, us as leaders of the church, this is probably the time where we're going to be held under a microscope. Taxes I didn't file correctly, and so the state came after me. It got resolved, by the way, so that's fine. This is a time where I guess the English saying is, this is time to make sure that all your T's are crossed and all your I's are dotted. Pay attention to details. Yeah, so I don't think this is the time where we could be complacent, or to use this analogy from True Mother, it's not the time to be stagnant, to be still water. True Mother is warning us that if we're not pure water, that is an opening now for outside forces to attack us. Again, it could be the government, it could be other things. So this is a chance. God is telling us this is a chance to come clean before God, to repent, to move forward and flow like pure water. One of the characteristics that True Mother talks about, pure water. Pure water it's not still. It's not just staying in one place. Pure water is flowing. You probably know. To be honest, I'm complacent. I'm doing my own stuff. I'm focused on the day-to-day things about paying bills, working. But I know each of one of us is being called by God to do something. And of course, I do know that whatever God is calling you to do right now, I know it's not the easiest thing in the world. And I know it's not the easiest thing in the world because if it was, then you would have done it already. And if you had done it already, then God would be asking you to do something else. Because that's the thing, is with pure water, you can't be stagnant. You complete one mission, God is going to give you another mission. And again, I don't misinterpret. This is not saying, keep working without rest. God, He rested after creation. I'm not saying work without rest. But it means just don't stay still for long periods of time. One interesting example. This past week, we had a field trip to the Delaware water filtering facility. They do a lot of tests. Every 4 hours, they do hundreds of tests to check for impurities in water. If they find any impurities, if they find any diseases, they are required by a higher power, the EPA, to take care of that. They shock the system. They attack the water. They put chlorine. They do stuff to purify the water to make it safe for the rest of us to drink. If they cannot fix it, they flush it out into the wastewater system. Another thing too, an interesting analogy, is they do respond to calls when facilities. The tour guide used the example of a hospital. The hospitals have to test the water, and sometimes the water that the hospital tests it's bad. So they come out and they check it out. The tour guide, the water treatment guy, says almost every single time that the water has been bad at the hospital, it's because the water has been stagnant in the pipes. This pipes just provides breeding ground for bacteria. It leaches heavy metals. Again, still water is not good. It's how it gets toxic. So get the water moving. So I think again these attacks that we were talking about, whether it's on a church, I don't think it's punishment. I think this is again outside forces that we need, that is agitating the water, getting the water moving, getting us moving again. And I think this is so I think this is a very important time. That in the timeline when I was showing here, I left it as a question mark. The reason why is because I don't think things are predestined for whatever happens next. It's this, we are in control, and God wants us to unite with Him. So that is what I guess I would like us to consider and think about, to be like King Hezekiah, who served God and relied on Him to deliver Judah from the Assyrian army. I think God is calling us to be like Saint Francis of Assisi, who embodied the Reformation that God wanted to see in the church and change the lives of people around Him. I things. He wants us to be united. God, we should be united with God, like with Mother Moon, and be like pure mother. So I'd like to, take some time for reflection, maybe about, I don't know, a minute or two, to think about what do we need, what do you feel God is calling us to purify within ourselves? What action do we think we're being called by God, by Heavenly Parent, to take? After we do some self-reflection, maybe we'll spend a minute or a couple minutes to share with your neighbor. Some of it will be private, it will be very personal. So again, only share what you feel comfortable. And yeah, so Nathan, I guess we could, whenever you're ready, we could consider this. All right, we'll probably conclude in another minute. Just heads up. right. Thank you, everyone. I'm sure this, yeah, thank you again for sharing. And if you guys want to continue your discussion, reflection during lunch, I think that would be amazing. I'm just going to conclude this sermon, this talk, with just a couple quotes from the Bible and from True Mother. All right, Matthew 5:8. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. And from Mother Moon, pure water can reflect the light of heaven. That is the heart of a true child of God. So once again, yeah, just to conclude, I think we are definitely in a very important, a very interesting season in timelines. I think we're being called to recognize it and to, well, yes, do what God has been wanting to do throughout the whole of history. Come back to Him, unite with God, and do whatever He's asking us to do. All right, so I'm going to invite David up to give the announcements, and then we're going to conclude in prayer.